Welcome to the Jinn&Tonic show. This is a weekly calling discussion show that focuses on the religion of Islam and related topics in juxtaposition to the propaganda of far-right of Muslim apologists and far-right conservative. Wait a minute here. Now I'm getting a bit. So, okay. Sorry, I got a little bit disturbed there. Okay, so welcome everybody. Today I am taking a break from my pagan midsummer celebrations, so I hope it will be a very good episode. Today hopefully Raven will come on and share with us his presentation on whether or not Mohammed existed or not. I don't know exactly what he will bring up, but I think it will be. It's a topic that you can talk about. Hello, BJ Price. Yeah. So, yeah. Hopefully, Raven will come on. I haven't prepared anything. I've been very busy the last weeks. But I just read some news here. Yeah, I shared the link in the chat also. Robert Spencer did it already. Yeah, but it's a long topic. I mean, yeah, it's a long topic. Raven will say the Muhammad we think we know doesn't exist. Yeah, we'll see what he say. But now I read some news. Arab states issue a list of demands to end Qatar crisis. So my former home country, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab countries that have cut ties to Qatar have reportedly issued a list of demands to end a major Gulf crisis, insisting that Qatar shut down the Al Jazeera network, close a Turkish military base, and scale down ties with Iran. In the 13-point list, the countries also demand that Qatar sever all alleged ties with the Muslim Brotherhood and with other groups, including Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, ISIL, also known as ISIS. Anyway, I don't know if they really have ties with ISIS. That's some, but anyway, that's just an interesting development, and this is also kind of interesting because one of the demands, which is kind of absurd, is to shut down Al Jazeera. Call for closure, siege against journalism, says Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera media network has condemned a demand by Saudi Arabia and 3 other Arab countries to shut the media organization, calling it nothing short than a siege against the journalistic profession. The network said in a statement on Friday that the move aimed to silence the freedom of expression in the region and to suppress people's right to information and the right to be heard. We assert our right to practice our journalism. Anyway, this is just one of the weird demands from KSA, that they shut down Al Jazeera and their affiliates. It's kind of weird. So I don't know if anyone has anything to say about that. What countries don't have ties with Muslim Brotherhood in some kind? Well, I mean, I know some Scandinavian countries whose ruling, the guys that sit in the government and the ruling majority have ties to Muslim Brotherhood. So Green Party. So, but at Social Democrats. But anyway, so yeah. I don't know what ties doesn't have much. I mean, Saudi Arabia isn't really Muslim Brotherhood in itself, but I'm sure Muslim Brotherhood would like to infiltrate all and everything, so they probably have some ties to them as well. I mean, there are definitely Muslim Brotherhoods guys in Saudi Arabia. I've met people who are Muslim Brotherhood in Saudi Arabia. They tend to be very sly and so on. Yeah, see if we find any other news. Yes. So ISIS are getting their asses kicked right now. So that's interesting development. Let's see if my favorite site has something to say. Okay, what should we say? Analysis: 2 US cases provide unique window into Iran's global terror network. Okay. Analysis: 2 US cases provide unique window into Iran's global terror network. On June 8, the Department of Justice made an announcement that deserves more attention. 2 alleged Hezbollah operatives had been arrested inside the United States after carrying out various missions on behalf of the Iranian-sponsored terrorist organization. The plots took the men around the globe, from Thailand to Panama and even into the heart of New York City. Both men were naturalized US citizens. Now Mr. Ike have joined. Welcome, Mr. Ike. Let's see if I have. Yeah, so this is Ali Qurani, a 32-year-old who was living in Bronx, New York, pictured on the right, allegedly gathered information regarding operations and security at airports in the US and elsewhere, while also surveilling the US military and law enforcement facilities in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Well, I mean, this could be like ordinary. I mean, Iran is a state, so of course they will have maybe they kind of hire Hezbollah to do some intelligence service on their behalf. I don't know, but that's maybe something that I mean, the Shiites can also make terrorist attacks, so maybe that's something you might consider, because you only think, yeah.
Can you define terrorist attack?
No, but you know broadly what I mean. No, define terrorist attack. I'm not very much into defining words, as you may know. How would you define a terrorist attack?
Terror, it comes from Latin, means in general fear.
Yeah, I know, it's irhab.
It's very, very simple, I think.
Everything that aims to cause terror. Yeah, of course. I mean, this terror, what is terrorism? I mean, the Muslim will say that the real terrorist is the United States. They are the real terrorist. And here you can see drone attacks, US kills, Al-Qaeda in Arabic Peninsula, Provincial Amir in Yemen. So maybe they say this is terrorist attack because they are killing us with drones. Drone attacks, US kills. Please mute yourself. I get... Oh, it's Rob. Welcome, Rob. How are you doing, man?
Hey, guys. Just got home, man. Been a long day. How are you?
I'm fine.
Hey, Ike. How you doing, buddy? You just reading some news there?
Yeah, we're waiting for...
Yeah, I was just on Skype now with Raven. He was a little bit unsure that I wanted him to actually present something, but he managed to have a look. So he's just testing his mic, and he has got something that he's going to share with us. So that should be coming in a short while.
Oh, yeah, I continue with my discussion with Naeem here. Okay, so maybe US kill I don't know who that was. It doesn't matter. I read that later. Taliban strikes back in homeland. Islamic State destroys mosques. This is kind of funny. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi delivering his first speech, Caliph Ibrahim, at An-Nouri Mosque in July 2014. The Iraqi government announced today that the Great Mosque of An-Nouri in Mosul has been destroyed. U.S. Central Command subsequently released a statement accusing the Islamic State of demolishing the holy site. The demolition of An-Nouri is a milestone in the war against Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, so-called caliphate. I thought they destroyed it themselves.
I think that was the first statement that they destroyed themselves. It was in the news. And later, the US admitted that they bombed the whole thing.
Dude, you're more up to date than I am. Starting to get. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else.
And it's like the fourth time, and now I think that he is being declared dead, and nobody knows if he is dead or not.
Yeah, the Russians said we may have killed him. We'll see. It's a bit harder than you might think. Like, it's kind of weird if you think about it. How hard it is to kill them or to find them, but. Yeah, Marshall. Welcome, Marshall. How are you doing, Ayub?
Yeah, how you doing, bro?
Kifak ya rajul.
Yeah, so I just want to know, what is the topic about today?
The topic is, did Mohammed exist?
Oh, that's one of the. You think that Muhammad did not exist, right?
Nah, I'm actually more conservative. I think there was a guy that existed, but I think he's was very, very different from the guy that is presented in the Sunnah.
Yeah, but as far as I know, I think that there is a historical evidence that Jesus Christ was real and he did exist.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was some historical Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if there is historical evidence that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did exist, but we do believe that he did exist, and I think some scholars, Muslim, they claim that they have historical evidence for it.
Sorry, were we talking about Jesus now or Muhammad?
No, I'm just saying Muhammad, even though we don't have a historical evidence for Muhammad that he did exist, but most of Muslims, including scholars, they believe that he did exist.
Yeah, but I would say that there are there are several sources that indicates that there was an important dude. There was an important general or in that time. There's one source that says that this leader of the Saracen, that he led the invasion of the Holy Land, which contradicts the Sunnah. So that was 2 years after he allegedly died. Yeah, say name.
Can you say which source that is? Or
I don't remember from I have a video on my channel. You can find. I liked a video of Tom Holland. He says it in that video. He says many good things in that video. If you want to have it's called, or you can Google or YouTube, Tom Holland Origin of Islam. In that he cite the sources. That is kind of, if you want a very quick, if you don't want to read his whole book, I think that video is kind of good because Tom Holland Origin of Islam. You can.
I personally think that the problem is not if the Prophet they did exist or not, because we know for a fact that they did exist. But the problem is, do this Prophet they really receive revelation from God? That's the $1 million question. I mean, we know for a fact they were real and they exist during their time. So, I mean, it's not a debatable topic.
It is because it's talking about facts. So what are those facts?
I mean, all the prophet they exist, and we got historical evidence for it.
Yeah, but I asked you, what are the facts? You are talking about facts. So how can you show these facts?
Facts. The fact is that all the prophets they did exist.
All the prophets.
Yeah, I'm talking about from Adam to Jesus.
I don't think there are historical sources that supports that Adam existed.
So Marshall,
yeah.
Ayub, when Ike asks you what's the evidence for the prophets existing, you say the prophets exist.
Yeah.
Okay, so look up the word evidence and then come back to us. So when you ask for evidence, you don't just reassert what you've already said.
So okay, fine. So you guys are going to talk about did the prophets exist. So if your guy, then your job is actually to disprove those people that they did exist.
Well, it depends. Raven's going to join us shortly.
Because I'm pretty positive that you cannot disprove these people they did not exist.
Well, we'll have to see what Raven comes up with, but it also depends what you mean by prophet.
Oh, prophet. I mean, if someone was
could be that those people existed. Could be. It might be that there's legends of people that might have existed
possibly.
But didn't.
I mean, a prophet is someone who receives revelation from God and he claimed to have, connection with God.
Yeah, well, in that case, I think we'd have to disbelieve just by default, wouldn't we? We could suggest that a person called Jesus or a person called Mohammed or a legend of those two people could have existed. But by default, the null hypothesis neutral position would be disbelief, if that's your definition.
I mean, as you said, I think I agree with you because, as you said, we don't have definitive evidence that all those people which we believe to be prophet from God, they did exist. But the thing is, we have a belief in them because the Quran which we have today and we believe is the word of God, it says that those prophets, they did exist. So we gotta believe. We gotta believe, we don't know if they exist, but we have to believe in them.
Yeah, but that's called faith, isn't it? Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Then the word fact is just simply wrong in your using.
Exactly. I think you're right because no one can actually say those prophets are categorically existed.
Then it's not a fact. Then it's just your wishful thinking.
It's a belief, as you said. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you sort of embracing the word belief more. I mean, most of us have beliefs. A few of us have got knowledge. We can have knowledge about certain things, but knowledge about, overall ideologies, I think, is incredibly problematic, especially ideologies which, claim supernatural or mysterious or, amazing things without any evidence. So everybody keeps saying atheism is a belief system or a worldview. No, it's not. It's a single claim. So it's more like naturalism. I would probably be a naturalist, although I don't rule out some other type of, but it depends how you define naturalism. So is anything that happens within the universe as we understand it natural? Well, then, I guess I would consider myself natural because even if a ghost existed or God suddenly created a flood, that would be eventually be called a naturalistic interpretation. So it depends how you define it.
I think, as you said, Rob, and as you told me before, there's a difference between knowledge and belief. Yeah. So a belief is not based on evidence, but knowledge is not based on. When you say I know something, you know that you can prove it. But when you say I believe in something, which means that you cannot 100% prove it if it's correct.
Yeah. Of course, we just talk about it. Like I say, I know the sun's going to rise tomorrow. Which is just how we talk in normal language. But if we were talking about an argument or we're talking or attempting to talk philosophically, then we wouldn't say that. We'd say, I believe with a high degree of certainty that the sun will rise tomorrow. You couldn't even say 100%. You'd have to say 99. There we go. Welcome, Raven. I'll let you take over, sir.
Oh, he got late.
Well, if you want to, Raven, can you hear us?
Welcome, Raven!
Hello.
There you go.
Wait a minute.
All right, sir. We will pass the baton to you and chat to us, introduce, let us know, and we will listen attentively.
I just want to say, I've really got to say this, because if I'd have known I was presenting, I would have prepared. I didn't know. Rob says to me on Skype, got any idea for a topic? And I'm like, oh, we could do this, could do that. One of the things I suggested was like validity of the prophets. And Rob goes, yeah, that's a good one. We'll do a title for that. And I only just realized a couple hours ago, because I was looking for another Gin and Tonic video, and I saw the lineup for the current one, like presented by Raven. Why did no one tell me? I genuinely did not know. I just thought Rob was asking me for a topic. I didn't. No one told me I was presenting.
Okay.
So I just want to keep that in mind. But yeah, so I do actually. I noticed about 3:30, so just like a couple hours ago.
Could I just draw your attention to?
I think I did, Raven. I did tell you the last. I did tell Raven the last time that he's gonna present.
Raven, can I just draw your? Can I just draw your attention for a moment? Hang on a second.
Asked me for the link to the NASA website saying the moon splitting never happened.
I was going to tell you, but you were quiet.
Let Speaker's Corner say what it is.
Raven, can I draw your attention to Tuesday, where I say, quote, "Hey Raven, just checking if there's any topic you'd like to present on this Friday, as Abu will host."
Did you say that? I misread it. I'm sorry.
Quote unquote.
But no, I didn't actually know. But fortunately, I did say. Okay, so presenting.
Well,
that was the mute button. So I got some notes here. I've got like I got this page here that I've written. I've got this page here. So there's quite there's quite a bit, and I've got a few links. So I don't know where to start. Should I start here or with that link? Okay, I suppose the first thing I will start off is slavery in ancient Egypt, because you can't really understand Jewish slavery in ancient Egypt unless you understand slavery in ancient Egypt. So one of the first things to mention is that not only is there absolutely no evidence for Jewish slavery in Egypt, there especially isn't. There's some scatterings of evidence for Semitic peoples, but there's no evidence of Jews, and there's certainly no evidence that Jews built the pyramids, as is told in the Abrahamic faiths. In fact, while for many years it was presumed that the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built by foreign slaves, toiling under the very harsh conditions over a period of decades. Today, many scholars actually refute this picture of ancient Egypt, believing instead that they were built by free Egyptians, some perhaps as seasonal conscripts with other artisans consigned primarily to the projects. Now, you also, you got to consider just how exactly Egyptians would really control so many slaves in one location with the rudimentary weapons of the Old Kingdom. And anyway, now one of the very difficult things to when it comes to the texts is that there are many different varieties of slaves in ancient Egypt. There's some which are more like serfs. There's the chattel slave, the inbound slave, the inverted slave, but they don't actually distinguish in the records themselves. So this is more something you have to gather from the context of the writings and the records and the hieroglyphs. And there's also, to my knowledge, I don't think they actually distinguish between slave and servant. Now, a slave is identified as one bound in servitude as the property of a person or household. Now, this is an interesting definition, considering that it does not refer to entities other than persons or households, such as the state. The definition of slavery does provide that it is the state of one bound in servitude at the property of a slaveholder or household, which seems to have a broader scope. Certainly, most of us will consider anyone bound in servitude, regardless to whom, a slave. In ancient Egypt, textual references to slaves are indistinct. From word usage alone, it is difficult to ascertain whether one was a slave or a servant. For example, a priest could be read as, but by our definition and understanding of slavery, he was not. In reading Egyptian texts, therefore, context is the only criteria status, and even then it can be difficult because there were different levels of servitude. Those who were not free include slaves, but also those with various degrees of encumbered liberty. For example, an artisan who worked on tombs who lived in the Deir el-Medina workers' village in the West Bank at Thebes simply walk off his job. Almost anyone under the authority of an absolute ruler, such as a pharaoh, might in some degree be considered a slave. We should also note that it is difficult to identify slaves from textual references. It's even harder to do so with descriptions. In fact, the term that conjures up anachronistic visions either of ancient Rome or of the 19th century plantation of the New World do very little to help understand slavery in Egypt. Most of the population in pharaonic Egypt were tied to the land or owned strictly hereditary professions. These men or women were often included among the possessions of kings, high-ranking officials, or temple estates. Serfs might better describe these people, though even that term is too closely connected with images of feudal society in medieval Europe, especially in view of the fact that Egyptian farmers were tied to the land, not so much legally, but by tradition and economic circumstance. For ancient Egypt, a better, or at least more precise definition of a slave might be a person owned by a master, as was any other chattel, used as the master pleased, to the extent of being disposed of by inheritance, gift, sale, and so forth. In reality, such slavery seems to have been fairly rare in Egypt prior to the Greek period, progressing over time. Like all ancient population statistics, estimating the number of slaves in ancient Egypt is based more on guesswork than on knowledge. In pharaonic times, their part in the population might have been greatest during the expansionary stage of the New Kingdom, when whole populations were enslaved at times. Thutmose III, for instance, is reported to have returned from a campaign in Canaan with almost 90,000 prisoners. Given the small size of armies, usually numbering in the thousands rather than tens of thousands of soldiers, most of these prisoners must have been civilians. There is one collective noun written with the Hosein hieroglyphic that refers to groups of people who belong to individuals and institutions such as temples. As early as the Old Kingdom, such groups were mentioned along with land and cattle. During the Middle Kingdom, we also know that they could be acquired by bequest or other arrangements. During the New Kingdom, they could be recruited from captives or given in an endowment. Considering their apparent permanent attachment to the land and their master, they were almost certainly a form of slave. Another similar term, written with the cannel sign, appeared to denote another group of people assigned to individuals and institutions, but who were not directly connected with land and cattle. Though we know little about this group of people, they may have been similar or the same as the king's slaves, who during the Middle Kingdom were often transferred to estates of priests, nobles, and officials. The king's slaves were considered the property of their master, but their occupations were not confined to agriculture, as they were also employed in households. We believe that their children undoubtedly inherited the status of their parents. In Egypt, as well as elsewhere, the principal and oldest cause of slavery was capture in war. Specifically in Egypt, the general rule was that all captives, including those outside of the military forces, became a royal resource. The king certainly did not keep all of these slaves, though some were resettled in colonies for labor. However, he also granted some of them to temples, to atrocious individuals, and also as booty for his soldiers. From ancient documents, we know that as many as 19 captives could be assigned to an individual as slaves, including both male and female. Temples, on the other hand, could receive an unlimited number of captives as slaves, and some references mention many thousands. Also, a trade in possibly captured people from foreign countries was also possible. For example, Amenhotep III ordered 40 girls from Milkilu, a Canaanite prince, paying 40 kit of silver for each. quote, "Behold, I have sent you Hanya, the commissioner of the archers, with merchandise in order to have beautiful concubines, i.e. weavers, silver, gold, garments, turquoises, all sorts of precious stones, chairs of ebony, as well as all good things, worth 160 deadpen. In total, 40 concubines. The price of every concubine is 40 of silver. Therefore, send very beautiful concubines without blemish." From the Brooklyn Papyrus, we learn that Near Eastern men and women were intermingled with Egyptian servants and outnumbered them. Increasingly, they seem to have been more highly regarded than their Egyptian counterparts. This is probably due to the fact that as prisoners of war or their descendants, they initially belonged to a social stratum superior to that of the Egyptian servants. In fact, the Egyptians of similar status probably came to be slaves due to committing some sort of unlawful act. Hence, some of the Egyptians who became slaves were originally free people who, having committed some sort of illicit acts, were forced to forfeit their liberty, perhaps including the liberty of their spouse and children. It should also be noted that the birth of the child to a slave mother, whether or not the father was free, resulted in slavery for the child. In fact, abandonment of undesired newborn children was not infrequently practiced in Egypt and the Near East, and has also been attested in Greco-Roman Egypt. Greco, of course, meaning Greek. Greco-Roman, Greek-Roman. So Greco-Roman Egypt, Greek-Roman Egypt. Though there seems to be no exact documents of such a practice in Egypt, elsewhere, foundlings were considered ownerless property who might be picked up to become slaves. Another way that one could come to be a slave was actually through self-sale into servitude, as several demographic pallida of the 6th century BC evidence. In reality, this did not result from the individual's free will, but was rather the results of their inability to pay off debt. A creditor therefore discharged the debt by acquiring the debtor as a slave. Not only did the debtor become a slave, but also his children, and in addition, he or she also gave up all that they owned. However, at other times, peasants might sell themselves into slavery for food or shelter. This also suggests to us that, unlike slaves of some other societies and periods, those of ancient Egypt were frequently better off than some of the poor freemen. Though not an uncommon business in ancient Egypt, information about slave trading is rare. There appears to have been no public market for slaves. Rather, individual dealers seem to have approached their customers personally. The transaction was evidenced by commercial documents executed before officials or a local council that contained clauses usually used in the sale of valuable commodities. One inscription that records the sale of land, together with 35 slaves, men and women, appears to infer that a special register of slaves was held by administrators. There may also have been a special tax levied on such sales. However, while slaves were often sold, they might also be transferred for other reasons, such as religious endowments. Why do I keep hissing? The 26th dynasty king, Apries, for example, decreed that a district near Memphis be dedicated to the god Ptah, together with its slaves, cattle, and their produce as a foundation. However, non-royal individuals might do likewise. An 18th dynasty overseer of Amun's domain, Senmut, did so, ceding fields and at least 2 slaves, a male and female, for baking bread and brewing beer. Although the steward of Amun's temple, a man named Amun-Mes, recorded on his statue the donation of all of his property to the state god, which included male and female slaves, houses, gardens, cattle, and all that he had obtained. Of course, slaves were also acquired through inheritance. In one demotic marriage agreement, the husband states that, quote, "To the children you shall bear for me, shall belong everything I own, be it a house, land, slaves, animals, chattels." Upon the death of the slaveholder, the slaves could become co-owned by the beneficiaries or distributed separately. When owned jointly, Each of the co-owners would be entitled a fraction of the slave's work, determined by a monthly number of slave days. Monthly number of slave days. Subsequently, this fractional owner could also sell or otherwise dispose of his share in the slave. The price of slaves varied, as of course it would over several millenniums. In the Ledi Imperius, dating to 727 BC, very late in the Pharaonic period, 32 slaves were sold privately for 1 devon and 1/3 chitin silver per slave. However, during the 25th and 26th dynasties, the average price was about 2.9 devons. In the Ramesside period, a dealer received barter goods worth 4 devons and 1 kite for a single young Syrian girl, according to the Cario Pabrius. Of course, silver was really used for such transaction, and there was no coinage. The prices stated were actually the values of goods exchanged. Hence, a named interf recorded 2 deeds on an 11th dynasty stelia in favor of 2 men to arrange the celebration of certain ceremonies in his favor after death. In return, he gave 1 man 20 packages of cloth and 10 to the other, as well as a male and a maid slave to each. How many slaves an individual could own varied considerably. One official of the 13th dynasty recorded well over 40 Near Eastern slaves in his personal possession. On one stelia, its owner reports, "I have acquired 3 male slaves and 7 females in addition to what my father granted me." An 11th dynasty stela also records its owner's boastful comments that, "Whereas my father's people were houseborn as property of his father and his mother, my people are likewise from the property of my father and my mother, but also from my own property, which I have acquired through my activities." The master might employ a slave in many different manners, such as in domestic service, as the guardian of children, cooks, brewers, or maids. They might be used as gardeners or field hands or in the stable. Also require the slave to learn a trade to improve his property, the slave. They could become craftsmen or attain a higher status. One of the items in an inheritance considered of some trade agents who were presumably trained slaves. Slaves were taught to write, could rise as high as a manager of the master's estate. In one case, a freeman was recorded in the Lepalod Parius as working under the supervision of a Nubian slave who belonged to the high priest of the god Amun. However, captive slaves were mostly assigned to the king and the temples, and their status entailed manual labor. Perhaps the worst treatment that a slave could be assigned, quarries and mines, and that's actually a point we'll get to soon. Although slaves were considered personal chattel and part of their master's property, and even though the master enjoyed a number of rights in their regard, the master was nevertheless held to some obligations. For example, the mistress of a household was responsible for nourishing the slave children and bringing them up. As far as I'm aware, this was also true to the wife of Pharaoh. The queen herself would actually have a hand in raising slave children. Also, from the contents of an 18th dynasty letter, we learned the child slaves were not allowed to be set to hard work. I think actually forcing a child slave into labor was actually a punishable offense. It was illegal. It should also be noted that slaves sometimes were adored members of the owner's household. For example, on one statue of a man and his wife, a young slave was also depicted as a token of affection. Also, as in many ancient legal systems, the Egyptian slaves were not only capable of negotiating transactions, but also of owning personal property. In the Wilbur Papyrus dating to the New Kingdom, there were no less than 11 slaves on the same footing as others, who were individual landholders, though their status regarding the property is not entirely clear. On a stela, we also find 2 slave women who each gave their master land in exchange for various commodities. They acted independently as owners of property. Slaves were also apparently given reasonable consideration in Egypt's legal system. Papery that reported the investigations of New Kingdom tomb robberies revealed, among others, several male slaves implicated in those crimes. During the hearings, the slaves seemed to be treated little differently than others. All these implicated were tortured to some extent, though many slaves in this case acted as witnesses, mostly against their master. Only some of the slaves were incriminated of complicity. Though little information has survived related to the marriage of slaves, a union was apparently possible. This seems to have taken place as cohabitation sanctioned by the master. Slaves were also, at least in certain circumstances, allowed to marry free people. During the New Kingdom, a king's barber gave his own niece as a wife to one of his slaves, and in another instance, a lady allowed her younger brother to marry one of her slaves. However, it must be noted in these examples that these slaves had to be publicly freed. In the latter case, the mistress actually extended the freedom to all her child slaves with the intention of adopting them and thus bequeathing to them her estate. Slaves, of course, were frequently not happy about being slaves. In ancient Egypt, there has so far never been any evidence to show that a slave ever purchased his freedom. When a slave escaped, the master could pursue the fugitive and ask the authorities for assistance in the recapture of the runaway. While the fugitive's best chance of escape was to leave Egypt altogether, this was not always as successful as it might at first seem. For example, in the famous treaty between Ramesses II and the Hittites after the Battle of Kadesh, fugitives, even of humble birth, were bound to be restored to their native land. The treaty reads in part, quote, "If a man or two men who are unknown flee, and if they escape from the country of Egypt, and if they don't want to serve him, then Hattusili, the great king, the king of the country of Hatti, has to deliver them into his brother's hands, and shall not allow them to inhabit the country of Hatti." It is likely that such treaties existed for other neighboring states. However, it would seem that most of the time, slaves only attempted escape when their treatment was unusually harsh. For many, being a slave in Egypt made them better off than a free man elsewhere. And of course, that is in direct contradiction to the stories in the Bible and Qur'an about how slaves were treated. In fact, it all seems completely fictional. So I don't know if anyone wants to quickly discuss what I've just read, or if you just want me to move on to religious claims.
What do you mean? In what way fictional?
Well, because I mean, obviously, the Abrahamic faiths make certain claims about what ancient Egypt were like, what slavery was like, the treatment of the pharaohs. You know, the Quran makes a point of saying that the pharaoh was wicked and ruled slaves in such a harsh way, none of which has any correspondence to reality. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on it or discuss it, or shall I move on?
Okay, you mean just in the sense of the telling about the pharaoh, not in general about slaves, about ruling over
Well,
the slaves.
the whole point of the Exodus, both in the Bible and the Quran, is that the Jewish people were enslaved. Not only were they enslaved, they were enslaved under hardship and tyrannical rule, to the point that God himself intervened. It makes, like the Bible and Quran, and even the Hadiths, make a huge point about just how hard slavery was. And this has no basis in reality.
Yeah. But what I mean is, besides this pharaoh's storytelling about the slaves in general, would you say that slavery is by the Muslims over others, non-Muslims, or even other Muslims, is also fictional?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of it you just get from the Quran and Hadiths. Neither one is reliable. I mean, the Quran just has different parts which come from different times. The frequency of the writing style in the Quran changes, which suggests different authors over time. And the Hadiths themselves, I mean, they don't even come till hundreds of years later. The Hadiths are just myth. Okay, there's not really any conversation, so I'll just move on. So next point, and I'll written something down. So much of our understanding of ancient Egypt comes from the texts of the Aegypticia, which I'll spell in case anyone wants to look it up. A-E-G-Y-P-T, so A, Egypt, I-A-C-A. Although sometimes Egypt is spelt with an I, so it will be AI, I don't know why. And in English, this translates as the history of Egypt. Now, in these texts, we find a chronology of the reigns of the ancient pharaohs, and it's a work of some interest to Egyptologists. The Aegypticia is organized chronologically and divided into 3 books detailing the dynasties or the ruling houses. It should be noted that in this context, dynasty refers to kings of a common origin, i.e. governmental power, rather than the modern sense of bloodlines. However, the Aegypticia includes mythological tales, legends, and fanciful stories, thus has to be taken with a pinch of salt. The Aegypticia is believed by some, although I will actually at some point get to a point of why this belief is actually very skeptical. But the Aegypticia is believed to have been written by a figure named Manetho, a Greco-Egyptian priest in the service of the temple of Ra, god of the sun. Though no sources dating his life and death exist, it's believed that if he existed, he was born in Jinn&Teos in the Delta during the time of Ptolemy I of Soter and or Ptolemy II of Philadelphus, and would have had access to sources which no longer exist, such as temple records. Though full copies of the texts no longer exist, there are references written by Sextus Julius Africanus, a Christian historian, born 180, died 250 AD, whose own life is not well documented. Flavius Josephus, original name Joseph ben Matthias, who was born either 37 or 38 AD, died 100 AD, a Jewish priest who wrote valuable works on the Jewish revolt of 66 to 70 AD, Aescubus of Caesarea, also called Excubus Pamphil, a Christian bishop persecuted by the Romans for his beliefs, who died a martyr in 310 AD, and George Celiadius, a Byzantine monk of the 8th century AD, who is said to have struggled valiantly against heresy and received many punishments from the rulers who raged against the rights of the church, though the accuracy of this claim is suspect. As none of these writings occurred during the same time period, and the original texts were used and abused by the theologian scholars for a long-running rivalry between proponents raging over which civilization was the oldest and greatest, Egyptian, Jewish, or Greek, our knowledge of the original source text is not only limited, but tainted by the biased opinions of the previously mentioned authors. Now, I want to take you to some of the arguments for Jewish slavery. And I just want to read out the arguments, and then I want to say why this is bullshit. So this is from a Jewish site. It's called www.haaretz, that's HAARETZ.com. Passover, Jews retell the story about the Hebrews' flight from slavery in Egypt and their miraculous escape across the Red Sea, giving birth to the nation of Israel. The colorful story has also been retold by Hollywood time and again, shaping the modern generation's understanding of the Israelite bondage in Egypt. But if ancient Egypt had slaves from the region known today as Israel, were they really Israelites? There is no direct evidence that people worshipping Yahweh sojourned in ancient Egypt, let alone during the time the Exodus is believed to have happened. There is indirect evidence, there's not, that at least some did. What's for sure is that thousands of years ago, Egypt was crawling with Semitic-speaking peoples, Canaanites descendants. Throughout antiquity, Egypt was known as the breadbasket of the world. The annual flooding of the Nile produced rich harvests, and when famine hit neighboring lands, starving peoples often made their way to the fruitful soils of Egypt. The archaeological record clearly shows that at least some of these peoples were of Semitic origin, coming from Canaan specifically and the Levant in general. In fact, the histories of both the Egyptian Upper Kingdom, ruled from Thebes in southern Egypt, and the Lower Kingdom, ruled from Abydos in the north, and Canaan were intermittently tied together. Starting over 4,000 years ago, Semites began crossing the deserts from Palestine into Egypt. The tomb of the high priest Khnefut II of the 20th century BC even shows a scene of Semitic traders bringing offerings to the dead. Some of these Semites came to Egypt as traders and immigrants. Others were prisoners of war, and yet others were sold into slavery by their own people. Aparius mentions a wealthy Egyptian lord whose 77 slaves included 48 of Semitic origin. In fact, by the late Middle Kingdom, around 3,700 years ago, Canaanites had actually achieved absolute power in the form of a line of Canaanite pharaohs ruling the Lower Kingdom, coexisting with the Egyptian-ruled Upper Kingdom. These Canaanite pharaohs included the mysterious Yaqub, whose existence is attested by 27 scribes found in Egypt, Canaan, and Nubia, and a famous one found in Sphacomona by Haifa. The biblical tradition of the patriarch Jacob settling in Egypt could well derive from this time. The coming of the Hyksos. In time, the Canaanite leaders were themselves ousted by the Hyksos, a mysterious group who settled in Egypt sometime before 1650 BC, and who came to rule the Lower Kingdom from the city of Avaris. Controversy remains, but it is increasingly agreed that the Hyksos originated from northern Lebanon or Syria. Some scholars believe the Semitic traders shown in the mural on Khufukhafet II's tomb are actually Hyksos. Under the Hyksos wing, the Canaanite population in the delta grew and waxed stronger, as shown by findings in ancient Avaris, Tel el-Daba. The Canaanite presence is attested by pottery that was Canaanite in form and chemically derived from Palestine. The dominant religious burial practices in Avaris at the time were also Canaanite. Eventually, the Hyksos in their turn would be vanquished. After a 30-year blood feud, the kings of Theb, led by Ahomos I, born 1539 BC, died 1514 BC, prevailed, capturing Avaris and uniting the lower and upper kingdoms into a single policy, the New Kingdom. The Hyksos were driven out of Egypt through the Sinai into southern Canaan. The Roman-era Jewish historian Josephus, who I mentioned before, Flavius Josephus, for one identifies the Hyksos with the Israelites. He cites the 3rd century, and remember this, he cites the 3rd century Egyptian scribe and priest, Manetho, who wrote that after their expulsion, the Hyksos wandered in the desert before establishing Jerusalem. Some scholars suspect that Exodus is based on distinct Semitic memories of the expulsion of the Hyksos. Others are dubious about Manetho's history, which was penned centuries after the actual event. Also, Hyksos were expelled monarchs of Egypt, not slaves. Ultimately, they are not very likely source for the Haggadah story. Yet another school thinks the Exodus happened hundreds of years later, during the time of the New Kingdom. And some suspect there were multiple expulsions and events that emerged over the millennia into the Passover story, enslaved by war. Ahmose not only expelled the Hyksos, he united ancient Egypt and began the process of expanding its empire to stretch over Canaan and Syria too. Egyptian scribes of Amios III and Thutmoses III wrote boastfully of campaigns in the Levant, resulting in captured prisoners being enslaved in Egypt. Various descriptions perfectly match scenes in the Passover Haggadah. The setting described in Exodus could be Egypt's East Delta, where the Nile floods every year. The area has no source of stone, and mud brick structures repeatedly melted back into the mud and silt. Even stone temples have hardly survived here. Physical evidence of slaves working there isn't likely to have survived, but a leather scroll dating to the time of Ramesses II, born 1303 BC, died 1213 BC, describes a close account of brickmaking, apparently by enslaved prisoners, of the wars in Canaan and Syria, which sounds very much like the biblical account. It should be noted that there's no reason whatsoever that that style of making should have been any different. I mean, if it works, it works. The scroll describes 40 taskmasters, each with a daily target of 2,000 bricks. See Exodus 5:6. Other Egyptian para-users, Anastasia the third and fourth. Wait, no, that's sixth. Is IV 4 or 6? I think it's IV, that's 4. So third and fourth, discussing using straws in mud bricks, as mentioned in Exodus 5:7. Quote, "You must not gather straw to give to the people to make bricks as formerly. Let themselves go and gather straw for themselves." The tomb of Visor Reclamiah, certified 1450 BC, famously shows foreign slaves making bricks for the workshop store place of the Temple of Ammon at Karnak in Thebes, and for a building ramp. They are labelled captures brought off by His Majesty for work at the Temple of Ammon. Semites and Libyans are shown fetching and mixing mud and water, striking out bricks from moulds, leaving them to dry, and measuring their amount under the watchful eyes of Egyptian overseers, each with a rod. The images bear out descriptions in Exodus 1:11-14 and 5:1-21. Quote, "They made their life bitter with hard labor, as they worked with clay mortar and bricks, and in very form of slavery in the field." Exodus 1:14. Also, the biblical description of how Hebrew slaves suffered under the lash is borne out by the Egyptian parias Bologna in 1094, telling how 2 workers fled their taskmaster because he beat them. The biblical descriptions of Egyptian slavery are accurate. Clues to Israelite presence in Egypt. Conclusively, Semitic slaves there were. However, critics argue there's no archaeological evidence of a Semitic tribe worshipping Yahweh in Egypt. Because of the muddy conditions of the East Delta, almost no papyri has survived, but those that did may provide further clues in the search for the lost Israelites. The papyrus Aniasti VI from around 3,200 years ago describes how the Egyptian authorities allowed a group of Semitic nomads from Edom who worshipped Yahweh to pass the border fortress in the region of Tejeku, Wadi Tumeilat, and proceed with their livestock to the lakes of Pithom. Shortly afterwards, the Israelites enter world history with the Merenfati stele, which bears the first mention of an entity called Israel in Canaan. It is robustly dated at 1210 BC, i.e., as of writing, 3,226 years ago. These Yahweh worshippers were in ancient Egypt well after the Exodus is supposed to have happened. Members of the Yahweh cult may have existed there earlier, but there is no solid evidence for that. There are, however, indications. According to the scribe Mainfo, the founder of monotheism was Agosarath, who later adopted the name Moses and led his followers out of Egypt in Achilam's reign. I'll come to that later. Akhenaten was the heretic pharaoh who abolished polytheism and replaced it with monotheism, worshipping only the disk sun, Aten. In 1987, a team of French archaeologists discovered the tomb of a man named Apriel, or Aprieri. His name is spelled both ways in Egyptian inscriptions, commander of the charioteers and advisor of Amenhotep II and his son, Akhenaten. The visor's name, ending in El, could well be related to the Hebrew god Elohim, and the ending Aperlei could be indicative of Yah, short for Yahweh. This interpretation supports the argument that Hebrews were present in Egypt during the 8th dynasty, starting 3,600 years ago, so 1583 to 1292 BC. Egyptologist Sir Matthew Flinders Petrie holds the reverse view, that Akhenaten was the catalyst for the monotheistic views of the Hebrews, and that the Exodus happened in the 19th dynasty, 1292 to 1189, around 3,300 years ago. So did the Exodus happen? Ask Hatshepsut. Exodus 12:37 says 600,000 men on foot, beside children, went out from Egypt. That extrapolates to around 2 million people making the Exodus, extrapolated from Numbers 146. If around 2 million people left Egypt when the entire population would have been estimated at around 3 to 4.5 million, it would have been noticed and would have resounded in Egyptian records, which it never did. Note that Herodotus claims that 1 million Persians invaded Greece in 480 BC. The numbers were undoubtedly exaggerated, as in most ancient records, but nobody claims the invasion of Greece never happened. That said, as the Egyptologist Kenan Kitchen points out, the Hebrew word for thousand, Elioth, can mean different things depending on context. It can even denote a group, clan, or a leader, chief. Elsewhere in the Bible, Elioth could not possibly mean 1,000. For example, 1 Kings 20:30 mentions a wall falling in Aplek that killed 27,000 men. If we translate Elioth as leader, the text most sensibly says that 27 officers were killed by the falling wall. By that logic, some scholars propose that the Exodus actually consisted of about 20,000 people. The absence of evidence of a sojourn in the wilderness proves nothing. A Semitic group in flight wouldn't have left direct evidence. They would not have built cities, built monuments, or done anything but leave footprints in the desert sand. Yet more support for the Haggadah may lie in an interesting poem copied onto a papyrus dating to the 13th century BC, although original is believed to be much older, called The Adamotions of Impura, or The Lord of All, River of Blood. It portrays a devastated Egypt haunted by plagues, droughts, violent uprisings, culminating in the escape of slaves with Egypt's wealth. In short, the Impura Papyrus seems to be telling the story of Exodus from the Egyptian point of view, from a river of blood to the devastation of the livestock to darkness. Also, the Egyptians were not above altering historical records when the truth proved to be embarrassing or went against their political interests. It was not the praxis of the pharaohs to advise their failures on temple walls for all to see. When Thutmose III came to power, he tried to obliterate the memory of his predecessor, Hatshepsut. Her inscriptions were erased, her obligates surrounded by a wall, and her monuments were forgotten. Her name does not appear in the later annals. Moreover, records of administration in the East Delta seem entirely gone. Generally, the biblical writers interpreted actual history rather than invent it. The ancients knew that propaganda based on real events was more effective than fairy tales. A chronicler might record that King A conquered a city and King B was defeated. A royal scribe might claim that King B offended a god, and therefore was punished by that god, who allowed King A to seize his city. To the ancients, both versions would be equally true. However, many Egyptologists or archaeologists dance on the head of the pin. Each will have his own perspective on the Exodus story. None will have any evidence beyond contextual evidence to support their theories. The Exodus could be a distinct Semitic memory of the expulsion of Hyksos, a small-scale exodus by different tribes and groups of Semitic origin during various periods, or it could be a fable. Psychologically, though, why would scribes invent a tale about such a humble and humiliating beginning such as slavery? Describe their community's beginnings in such lowly terms. Most people prefer to connect their leaders to heroic deeds, or even to claim a direct lineage to gods. It is the story of the Exodus. This article does not aspire to prove blah 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 blah. Great waves coming out of Egypt. You know what? This wasn't even the article I wanted. I only realized after I started reading it was the wrong one. But there's enough information there. Why this is bullshit. Now, what Manfio actually states about the Hyksos is in complete contradiction to what's just been said there. Now, the site, as I said to remember, it actually mentions the writings of, where's his name? Flavius Josephus. Now, all of the propaganda and all of the tales of, well, all of the tales that give credit to the Passover myth comes to this writing. And the writing itself isn't even true. I mean, he says that the Hyksos were Israelites. He said things that were attributed to Manfio that Manfio himself never said. What it actually says in regards to the Hyksos, Manfio states, during the reign of Tumanios, a blast of God smote us, and unexpectedly from the regions of the east, invaders of obscure race marched in confidence of victory against our land. By main force, they easily seized it without striking a blow, and having overpowered the rulers of the land, they then burned our cities ruthlessly, razed to the ground the temples of the gods, and treated all the natives with a cruel hostility, massacring some and leading into slavery the wives and children of others. Finally, they appointed as king one of their number, whose name was Stelius. He had his seat in Memphis, levying tribute from Upper Egypt. In the Sayat Nome, he founded a city and called it Arios. He named these invaders the Hyksos, which he translated as shepherd kings, although now the term is often translated as foreign rulers or desert princes. However, contrary to the impression given by Manfio, the Hyksos were not in fact a distinct racial grouping, but rather the term used to refer to the rulers of the area around Avaris and Shurahen during the Second Intermediate Period, more generally known as the Amon. These subjects comprised a number of Semitic peoples driven from Western Asia into Africa by instability and famine during the Second Intermediate Period, dynasties 13 to 17, and native Egyptians. They appear to have established themselves in Lower Egypt, where they ruled from the city of Avaris for about 200 years. Their occupation was later described as a highly traumatic event for the Egyptian people, but it's not clear whether this was view of contemporary Egyptians who lived under their control. Thutmosis is generally thought to be the obscure 13th dynasty king Thutmose. The other kings with a similar reign are too late to be contenders, who reigned shortly before or concurrently with the Hyksos dynasty at Avaris. The passage is ambiguous, but it may refer to two events: the smiting of God, which some have chosen to see as a reference to the events surrounding Exodus, and the invasion of the Hyksos. It was previously thought that one reason for their ease in conquering Upper Egypt was that they had chariots, unlike the Egyptians, and were exceptional archers. There is some evidence that the Egyptians already had chariots, but they may well have been less experienced in their use. More speculatively, you could argue that the smiting by God left Egypt undefended, allowing the Hyksos to take control without striking a blow. Yeah, in quotes, without striking a blow. The Hyksos did indeed sack Memphis, but the description of their attitude to the gods could be anti-Hyksos propaganda. After all, they took Seth as their main god, while retaining their worship of Aristare, the Phoenician mother goddess, and Resheb, a Pharaonian storm god. Furthermore, the Hyksos adopted Egyptian customs and even preserved Egyptian culture. Apophis, the fifth Hyksos king, instructed scribes to copy Egyptian texts so they would not be lost. Because of his foresight, we've recovered priceless documents such as the Edwin Smith Surgical Papyrus, the oldest known surgical handbook, the Westcar Papyrus, the Rahine Mathematical Papyrus, the most important document describing Egyptian mathematical theory. Some of the Hyksos may have been Hurrian or Hittite, but no firm evidence has been discovered to confirm their origins fully. They were by no means the first Aztecs to settle in Egypt, prompting some to suggest that there was no major battle, just a steady influx of settlers who worked themselves into positions of power while retaining their own cultural differences. Evidence from the excavation of Tel Dabar confirms that the settlement was constantly evolving and changing as the new cultures adapted to the Egyptian way of life. Settlements discovered in Tel el-Ajul, southern Palestinian, Ebla, Syrian, and Byblos, Lebanon, share many characteristics with the settlement at Tel el-Dabar. The Hyksos brought with them knowledge of bronze weapons, chariots, and composite bows, but it's not clear that they were required to use this military know-how to take control of Upper Egypt. Blah, 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 blah. That's not important. Given the slow advance by the Hyksos rulers into southern Egypt, it becomes reasonable to infer, blah, 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 blah. It is possible that the whole area was blighted by plague, was God smiting, blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to get rid of this now. So, yeah. This is why all of that is bullshit. Same period, used and abused. Right. Many problems exist for the conclusion of the historical Moses. Proponents of the truth of the story often rely on dubious claims of the first century Jewish priest, Flavius Josephus, who I mentioned earlier. Drawing extensively from Matthew's works, the Egypticia, Josephus effectively rewrote the accounts of the Hyksos and the myth of the Egyptian figure of Osiris, which can be found in his work Against Apion. This is the first mention of the Egypticia, a text that should have been mentioned at least a few times in 300 years prior. Serious questions and legitimate doubt exists through date and authorship. What I would argue, which I'm sure plenty before me have also argued, is that the very idea of an official and authoritative history of Egypt, composed in Greek at the request of, at the latest, Polytimius II of Philadelphus, not only would not go unnoticed or ignored by Alexandrian librarians and professional scholars for centuries until Rabbi Flavius Josephus is laughable. More likely it was written in the Roman period, a short time before its first mention. If so, a likely author may in fact be Ptolemy of Mendes, a highly educated Greek priest born and raised in Egypt, who may have attributed this three-volume history to Manetho for credibility. The writer Clement of Alexandria, born 150, died 215 AD, who had access to the Great Library, names many authors in his bibliography, but no mention of Manetho. Well-read Christian writer Tetian, 120 to 180 AD, mentions solely Ptolemy of Mendes as the interpreter of their Egyptian affairs. Virtually every writer who touched upon his interests are cited. No mention of Manetho. Quote from the man himself: of the Egyptians also there are accurate chronicles. Wait, no. Wait, yes. What I've missed up there. Of the Egyptians also there are accurate chronicles, Phlogamy, not the king, but a priest of Mendes, is the interpreter of their affairs. This writer, narrating the acts of the kings, says that the departure of the Jews from Egypt to the places with a... What the hell did I just read though? I can't read my own writing. Whither they went occurred in the time of King Amias under the leadership of Moses. He thus speaks: Amias lived in the time of King Archibas. After him, Apion the grammarian, a man most highly esteemed, in the 4th book of his Aegypticia, verified books of his, besides many other things, says that Amias destroyed avarice in the time of the Argrivinicus, as the Mendansian Plotinus wrote in his annuals. So that's it. That is the first mention. A 1st century rabbi is the first to mention this figure, Montifo. You know, the name Amios in Greek, referring to the royal Egyptian name of Amos, was actually used by the first king of the dynasty edition of the Aegypticia. The Ebrius, who I mentioned before, consulted in order to make his contribution to the work. Now, according to Tertullian, born 155, died 240 AD, Ptolemy of Mendes wrote later than and followed Manetho. Now, this statement has usually been taken to mean that Ptolemy of Mendes consulted and commented on Manetho in his writings. It may also mean that Ptolemy of Mendes is responsible for everything we currently think we know about Manetho. It's very unlikely that Tatian, Aponio, and Clement were unaware of Manetho's history in 3 books, but according to Tatian, Apion read and followed Ptolemy of Mendes when he wrote his own history of Egypt in 5 books. Hence, it may be plausibly suggested that Tatian, Apion, and Clement all understood that Ptolemy of Mendes was the actual composer of the work entitled the Aegypticia in 3 books, and that Ptolemy of Mendes claimed to be the transmitter of Manetho's words. In this case, the work was not an anonymous or pseudo-anonymous work, but one wherein Ptolemy of Mendes explicitly claimed he was reporting the words of an important Egyptian high priest who lived 3 centuries earlier. Now, I mentioned before Oscareth, who was mentioned by Josephus. Actually, I think I wrote something in my notes. I really wish I knew I was supposed to be presenting on this episode. Monotheist Egyptian priest. I think I mentioned, yes. Drawing extensively from Manetho's work, the Aegypticia, Josephus effectively rewrote the accounts of the Hykelos and the mythic Egyptian figure of Oscaroth, which can be found in his work Against Aphelion. Now, who is Osferus? To really know who Osferus is, you have to know about the religious reforms of a king by the name of Acleon. And this actually has to do with the single worshipping of the sun god, the disk god, Aton. And I'm going to start with a prayer. How manifold it is that thou hast made. They are hidden from the face of man, O sole God, like whom there is no other. Thou didst create the world according to thy desire, whilst thou wert alone. All men, cattle, and wild beasts, whatever is on earth, guiding upon its feet, and what is on high, flying with its wings. The countries of Syria and Nubia, the land of Egypt, thou settlest every man in his place. Thou suppliest their necessities. Everyone has his food, and his time of life is reckoned. Their tongues are separate in speech, and their natures as well. Their skins are distinguished, as thou distinguishest the foreign peoples. Thou makest a Nile in the underworld. Thou bringest forth as thou desirest, to maintain the people of Egypt, according as thou madest them for thyself. The Lord of all of them, wearying himself with them, the Lord of every land, raising for them the Aton of the day, great of majesty. You are in my heart, There is no other who knows you, only your son, Nechratun, sole one of Ra, who is the Akutan man who I'm going to come to in a minute, whom you have taught your ways in your might. From your hand as you made them. When you have dawned, they live. When you set, they die. You yourself a lifetime, one lives by you. All eyes are on your beauty until you set. All labor ceases when you rest in the west. Stir everyone for the king. Every leg is on the move since you founded the earth. You rose them for your son, who came from your body, the king who lives by Mat, the lord of the two lands. Nerektura, sole one of Ra, the true son of Re, who lives by Mat, the lord of crowns. Achoten, great in his lifetime, and the great queen whom he loves, the lady of the two lands. Nefru, Achlan, Neretiu, living forever. Now, Atan is the disk of the sun. He's actually considered separate from Ra, the sun god, and I'll just try and explain why. So Atan, also known as Aton, is the disk of the sun in ancient Egyptian mythology, and originally an aspect of the god Ra. Now, the deified Aten is the focus of the religion of Atasin, established by Aphornemet IV, who later took the name Akiniat, who I've just mentioned before, who died in 1335 BC, in worship and recognition of Aten. In his poem, Great Hymn of Aten, which I've just read, Akinion praises Aten as the creator, giver of life, and nurturing spirit of the world. Aten does not have a creation myth or family, but is mentioned in the Book of the Dead. And the worship of Aten was eradicated by Humbeth. Now, the Aten, the sun god, is first referred to as a deity in the story of Sinhu from the 12th dynasty, in which the deceased king is described as rising as God to the heavens and uniting with the sun disk, the divine body merging with its maker. An analogy, the term silver Aten was sometimes used to refer to the moon. The solar Aten was extensively worshipped as a god in the reign of Antioch III, when it was described as a falcon-headed man, much like Ra. In the reign of Ahomet, the third successor, Ahomet IV, the Aten became the central god of the Egyptian state religion, and Ahomet IV changed his name to Akhenaten to reflect his close link with the new supreme deity. So, what is the significance of Akhtahan? Now, Akhtahan, meaning effective of Aten, known before the 5th year of his reign, as I said a few times, Atonet IV, sometimes given its Greek form, Amenophis IV, and meaning Atum the Satisfied, was an ancient Egyptian pharaoh of the 18th dynasty who ruled for 17 years and died perhaps 1336 BC or 1334 BC. He's especially noted for abandoning traditional Egyptian polytheism and introducing worship centered on the Aten, which is sometimes described as a monotheistic, heliosynthic, or even quasi-monotheistic. An early inscription likens the Aten to the sun as compared to stars, and later official language avoids calling Aten a god, giving the solar deity a status above mere gods. Now, Akhenaten tried to bring about a departure from traditional religion, yet in the end it would not be accepted. After his death, his monuments were dismantled and hidden, his statues were terminated, and his name was not to be included in the king's list. Traditional religious practices were gradually restored, and when some dozen years later, rulers without clear rights of succession from the 18th dynasty founded a new dynasty, they discredited Akhenaten and his immediate successors, referring to Akhenaten himself as the enemy or that criminal in the archived records. So, why does that matter? It matters because of Ozakera. And I'll just summarize again what I've said before. Drawing extensively from Manetho's works with the Egypterion, Josephus effectually rewrote the accounts of the Haikaios and the mythic Egyptian figure of Oscar Joseph. So who is Oscar Joseph? This is a mythological figure in ancient Egypt. I mean, like when I say mythological, I mean you can put him side by side with Hercules, right? And he's actually been equated by Flavius Josephus as being Moses. Now, his story was recounted by Manetho, if Manetho did exist, in his Egypt Kika, which, again, I mean, that might have just been written by that Christian. And then we don't even know. So already we're trying to establish the validity of the claims, and we don't even know the validity of the claims based on the source material, because we don't even know how valid the source material is. It's just a dog chasing its tail. So it's first mentioned in this, and Manetho's work is lost, but the 1st century AD Jewish historian Josephus quotes extensively from it. Now, the story depicts Oscosophus as a renegade Egyptian priest who leads an army of lepers and other unclean people against a pharaoh named Amiophis. The pharaoh is driven out of the country, and the leper army, in alliance with the Haikaios, who Josephus tries to basically reimagines as Jews. They ravage Egypt, committing many sacrileges against the gods before Amenphos returns and expels them. And towards the ends of the story, and this isn't even in the actual text, this is just bullshit that Josephus has put. Like, Joseph says that towards the end of the story, Oscaroth changes his name to Moses, and even if that is true, that could just be propaganda. I'll get to that in a second. So, I mean, also much debated is the question of what, if any, historical reality might lie behind the Oscaroth story. The story has been linked with anti-Jewish propaganda of the 2nd and 1st centuries BC as an inversion of the Exodus story, but an influential study by Egyptologist Jan Asman has suggested that no single historical evidence or person anything lies behind the legend, and that it represents instead several historical traumas, notably the religious reforms of Achaeon, which I've explained. Now, Josephus against Achaeon gives 2 long quotations from Manetho's Egypt Kata. The first is Manetho's account of the expulsion of the Haikaios, the name given by Manetho, allegedly, and their settlement in Judah, where they founded the city of Jerusalem. Josephus then draws the conclusion that Manetho's Haikaios were the Jews of the Exodus, although in the original text itself, the author makes no connection whatsoever to that. It's a fabrication. The second, set some 200 years later, tells the story of Oscarseph. Now, according to Josephus, Manetho described Oscaroth as a tyrannical high priest of Osiris at Heliopolis. Pharaoh Amanias had a desire to see the gods, but in order to do so, he first had to cleanse Egypt of lepers and other polluted people, setting 80,000 of them to work in the stone quarries, and then confining them to Avaris, the former Haikaios capital in the eastern delta. So it was there that Oscarseph became their leader and ordered them to give up the worship of the gods and eat the meat of the holy animals. The Oscarophites, I guess, his followers, then invited the Haikaios back into Egypt, and together with their new allies, drove Amenphos and his son Ramesses into exile in Nubia and instituted a 13-year reign of religious oppression. Towns and temples were devastated, the images of the gods were destroyed, the sanctuaries turned into kitchens, and the sacred animals were roasted over fires, until eventually Amenphis and Ramesses returned to expel the lepers and the Haikaios and restore the old Egyptian religion. And towards the end of the story, Manetho reports that Oscaroth took the name Moses. I mean, that to me, it just seems like blatant bullshit propaganda. You know, I mean, again, it was written at the height of anti-Jewish hysteria in Egypt.
Raven.
Now, some of the interpretations, there's 3 interpretations have been proposed for the story. The first, as a memory...
Before you go on, Raven, can you... I was interrupted by a thing. What have you been talking about so far? Can you give us a summary, just, of what you've been talking about?
I'm looking for a source for the Moses story, and not only have I found no source for Moses, it seems Moses was propaganda from a mythical figure, and that was written by a man who may not have existed, which was said to come from a text that apparently hadn't even been written until 300 years after it was supposed to be published. And as I said before, the entire fucking thing is like a dog chasing its tail.
How is this?
I mean, this is the validity of the Prophet Moses. This is the historical accuracy of the Prophet Moses. This is what we have to go on.
But what is this related to the Prophet Muhammad?
It's all about Moses.
It's all about Moses, okay.
Well, I mean, it's related to the Prophet Muhammad in the sense that Muhammad said that Moses was real.
Yeah. Okay.
But Moses is a major figure in Islam.
Okay,
Christianity.
Yeah, maybe we should change the title later to "Did Moses Exist?" But
you can always do like a part 1, because I mean, again, I didn't actually know until like 2.5 hours before the show started that I was supposed to do a presentation. So you could do it as like, did the prophets exist? Part 1, Moses, and then like next week, I could actually have a whole week to compile something on Jesus and do like, you know, a proper presentation where I'm like, does it actually come across from the way that I've been presenting it that I was desperately trying to put something together?
Actually, I was distracted by another thing. But
I would say no, Raven. I would say no because I would say no because it's a little bit too monologue, a little bit too the same tone over and over, and people just forget what you said 2 minutes ago, because it's without any pictures or maps or some sources to show. People will forget things very very fast, and it's just gets boring at times, and then yeah, you know what I mean.
Well, just to summarize then, one interpretation of the story is that it's a memory of the Amarana period. The second is a memory of the Hyksos, and the third is an anti-Jewish propaganda. You know, and each explanation does have evidence to support it. The name of the pharaoh, Amenhotep, and the religious character of the conflict fit the Amorala form of Egyptian religion. The name Avaris and possibly the name Oscareth do fit the Hyksos period, and the overall plot is an apparent interpretation of the Exodus story, casting the Jews in a bad light. No one theory, however, can explain all the elements. An influential proposition by Egyptologist Anne Asman suggests that the story has no single origin, but rather combines numerous historical experiences, notably the Amoran and Hyksos periods, into folk memory. An alternative theory that identifies Oscareth as the historical figure of Chancellor Bey, identified as Irsu, an alleged Syrian usurper of the Egyptian throne after the 19th dynasty died out, is generally rejected. Another theory is that Oscareth's name is based on the biblical Joseph, as a combination of Osiris and Joseph. That would actually be funny, since Jews reject Jesus, and yet Osiris is basically the Egyptian Jesus, you know, born to a virgin, persecuted, even fucking crucified. Some modern scholars have suggested that the Oscareth story, or at least the point at which Oscareth changes his name to Moses, is a later alteration to Manetho's original history, made in the 1st century BC, a time when anti-Jewish sentiment was running high in Egypt. Without this, Manetho's history, which we don't even know if it was, has no mention of the Jews at all. If the story is an original part of Manetho's history of Egypt, as many other scholars believe, the question arises of where he would have heard it, as the Greek Sukungani translation of the Hebrew Torah, i.e. the Exodus narrative, had not been made when he was writing. Or suppose that he had an oral Jewish informant, or possibly an otherwise unknown relation. And I'll stop it there. I kind of want to go onto the YouTube chat just to see what people are saying, but I'm kind of
Hey,
not
Raven,
wanting to. I just kind of feel like they'll be bashing me.
you ever heard the saying, sinning against the Holy Spirit?
Sitting against the Holy Spirit. No.
Sinning.
Sinning.
It means denying your
Did you say
maker.
sinning?
Yes.
Sinning against the Holy Spirit. Well, I suppose that could be interpreted in lots of different ways. Denial, blasphemy, being the wrong religion.
Was it Kevin? Welcome, Kevin. What's your point?
I'm just saying, everyone's sinning against the Holy Spirit when they deny their maker.
What's the Holy Spirit?
Okay.
God's
And what's-
superpower,
which-
God's magic.
Which God is that?
I'm not sure I actually know what the Holy Spirit is. Honestly, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. The
Jehovah,
Father and
the God of
Son,
Abraham.
I understand that part. I don't really understand the Holy Spirit.
I think Kevin said the God of Abraham. Okay.
Well, what is the Holy Spirit, though? Because, like, the Holy Spirit, as I understand it, is actually supposed to be a spirit. But that's never really made sense to me because, you know, I mean, Jesus wasn't supposed to be a ghost. He was supposed to come back to life and rise up into heaven. So I don't really get... I've never really understood the whole Holy Spirit aspect.
Yeah. Kevin, can you explain what the Holy Spirit is?
Well, sure, many false Christians in our day, they teach that it's some sort of Trinity God, the third person in the Trinity. But it's actually not a person. It's a superpower. It's magic.
Every Christian I've ever known says that the whole Trinity thing is actually 3 in 1. So it's just like a stage of being, but it's all like the same person. Except for Mormons. I mean, like, they teach that Jesus is a separate entity.
I believe Jesus is the clone of God. So yes, he's part of God.
The
Cool,
what?
yes.
The Lamb
So what do
of
you think
God,
of the Quran
or
and Prophet Muhammad?
the crown of God? What did you say?
And
Kevin.
I'm just asking Kevin what his opinion is on the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad.
Muhammad is just a guy that started his own religion. He did not have God's approval or blessing.
How do you know?
Just my opinion.
Okay, but
But you know, if you deny Muhammad and his revelation, you will go to hell. You know that.
It
I
does
don't
say in
believe
the
in hell.
Quran that disbelievers
We are
go
in
to
hell right now.
okay.
Pretty sure we're on Earth.
I'm just warning you. I'm just warning you that Muhammad warned us all. So if you don't follow him, you will go well, no matter if you
I am
believe it or
not.
not.
I'm not God. I'm not Allah. I'm not going to live forever.
I am.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna
I'm
go
gonna check out the
anything
chat.
further with this.
So, is there any thoughts or comments on what I've said?
No, it would be fun if Juice for Cheeses would be here because he knows a lot about these things, I think. But stop spamming joined. Welcome, stop spamming. Have you been listening?
No one even cares. We're just talking about Kevin now.
Stop spamming is silent.
I'm a little bit flabbergasted. I don't know what to comment on this. This is so strange. This is Freaky Friday.
Freaky Friday. Well, I mean, the point is that there's really no good reason to believe that the prophet Moses existed, and that it's highly implausible. Is that?
Yep. I mean, there's no evidence that there's no evidence of Jewish slaves. There's no evidence of there's no evidence of being lost in the desert for 40 years. There's no evidence that a quarter of the population left. I mean, you'd expect that to be in the records. I mean, like even in like other empires, like in Greece, in Rome, there's not even a footnote saying, "Hey, hear what happened in Egypt." It would have been big news, and there's nothing. And
what did you say? In Rome?
But like this desert they were lost in for 40 years, right? It was 120 miles. They could have crossed it in a week. And like some of the apologists about, well, they wouldn't have built settlements or anything. This was like 600,000, and then you got to add the families. So that's like 2 million people. That is 2 million people, a quarter of the population. 2 million people lost in a desert that they could have crossed in a week for 40 years. And there's nothing. There's no pottery, there's no remains, no campsites. There's
there's also common sense. I think I worked out, because there's a story. I mean, the God of the Bible must be a total idiot. He doesn't even know basic arithmetic. Because if you take the story of 2.5 million people drinking from 12 different streams, I worked out it will take over a year for each one of them to drink. How many people would be left over if they have to wait for 1 year before they can get a drink?
What's more funny about this whole wandering is they are called slaves or possessings of the Egypt, but in the same Bible they have their own slaves. They are escaping with their own slaves too. So not even we are told that the Egyptian took them as slaves, but the slaves had slaves. That's.
By the way, people in the chat are asking for a Hangout link.
And you need to remember also that these slaves, actually before they left, they stole all the gold and all the jewelry of their masters. That's not a nice thing to do.
You don't believe in Moses, the murderer?
Did Moses actually murder anyone?
According to the Quran, he did.
To the Bible too, and one had, I think, is lashed another Hebrew or another slave or something like that. And he died of that, and Moses revenged the death.
Kevin, let me just give you a pointer. We don't believe in very much at all.
I understand, but I'm trying to get people to leave religion and turn against God in the audience.
I neither care for religion nor gods. So religion is just a manifestation of what people imagine a god should be or could be. And gods are just imaginary. Okay, so I don't know. I don't have a single reason, not one, why anybody would.
No, I understand. I'm on your side. But there's people out there being defrauded by this religious organizations.
Kevin, what is a god?
God is the one that made us, Adam and Eve.
Okay, no. I didn't say what he did. What is a god?
He's the higher power.
He's what?
He's the head honcho.
What is a god? Don't give me head honcho. I don't know what a head honcho is. What is a god?
I don't know. You tell me. What's your interpretation?
No, I don't know any gods. I don't know what a god is. That's why I'm asking those people who claim there is a god to tell me what a god is.
Kevin, are you an atheist or what are you?
I'm a maltheist and a mistheist. I believe God is evil and I hate him.
So why do you believe he exists though?
Because he does. Why am I going to lie to myself? I live a lie.
I think I'm always correct.
Okay, Answer. Welcome
Hello.
to the show.
Thank you.
What do you have to bring to the table?
I've just picked it up a bit late. I'd managed to just turn up late, so I haven't really seeing it from the beginning. It's not really a strong topic for me. Did the prophets exist or not? It's not something I particularly care too much about. Whether they actually physically existed or not, whether they did all the magic that they claim, that's a different question, and I'd be more interested to talk about that.
Well, Moses, did he do magic? No. I think it was this God thing, whatever it is, telling him to hit your rod and then something happens, and do this and then something happens. I don't know why he needs Moses as a go-between, why he doesn't just fucking go and do it. But Moses didn't do anything. The same as Mohammed.
That is an alien ready to kill us and take over the planet.
Moon, but this was the God who split the moon, not Mohammed. So I think Moses also didn't do anything.
Okay, fair enough. Even then, I think it'd be questionable whether any of that magical occurrences ever did occur in that way, without a physical explanation.
Well, there isn't any. That's it. Finished.
Ah, well, I think we've lost someone.
Yes, we've said goodbye to Kevin. I think he's a troll.
Yeah, or at best.
That's the problem. Today, in today's time, you can't distinguish troll or just insane.
Yes.
You
can
see that.
I mean, troll is kind of the original meaning of troll was more like people who trolled people. They use kind of psychological tricks to. I mean, that was. I'm not necessarily against trolls.
I know.
It's like, I mean, you can troll in a productive way, but if it's just nonsense, it's.
How do you troll in a productive way?
like Socrates did, for example. He trolled in a productive way. He went around and trolled people.
We did at the Jinn&Tonic show. We sent Klingshaw to the Rational, what was it, Defense League or something like this, and he trolled them, pretending he was a Muslim.
Abu, how much is the troll established in Sweden? I know Norwegian and Icelandic is very into fairy tales and fairies and trolls.
Oh, there are a lot of trolls. There are a lot of trolls whole of Scandinavia, I would say. There's also this called the tomte, which is a small man. It's not really a troll. It's a small man, same as Santa Claus, but smaller. They run around and do stuff.
It sounds like
Aren't you also that Krampus originates from?
What?
Aren't you also the region that Krampus originates from?
Krampus?
Yeah, doesn't that originate from Scandinavia?
Isn't that
I don't know what that is.
Baked round dough balls?
Well, no, Krampus is like, you know how you got Jesus and the Antichrist, right? Krampus is like the anti-Santa.
Oh shit! Okay.
He's basically like a demon version of Santa. He's got like horns and hooves, and I think he kidnaps naughty children or kills them or something like that.
Yes, you're right. It is. It's correct. It comes from Scandinavia. I've also heard this. Yeah.
Is it Iceland right now where there's like 60% of the population believes in trolls or goblins?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of people, a lot of children and stuff that believes in. This is a.
No, apparently, like in that.
These guys.
But no, apparently in Iceland, it's like adults believe it, believe in trolls and shit or goblins or whatever.
There are people. There are people who believe in trolls and tomtar and things.
Let me tell you something about this tomtar thing. In Germany, we have recently, the last 3 to 4 years, the state pays some channels on YouTube, and there is also a Muslim channel, and they done like a little quiz show and asked the audience and amongst themselves some things, and they said the originate of this tomtar thing would be in Turkey, not in Scandinavia. Just because you show.
And leprechauns originate from Australia.
Turkey.
Of course.
I'm
Why not?
I think the word tomt means like the area that you own. It's like a real estate.
Leprechauns originate from Australia. Odin originates from Baghdad.
Odin originates from Baghdad. I don't think so. Odin is no. Look,
No, I know. I'm taking a piss because you know, like all Krampus originates from Turkey. Yeah, sure. Leprechauns originate from Australia. Odin originates from Baghdad.
Turkey is one thing because look, there's good reasons to believe that. Yeah, this is sensitive stuff. Like, or the Asa gods and the Greek gods and these dudes, they probably had a similar origin, and they probably originated with the Indo-European language because it's so similar to the old Hindu gods, like in the Vedas. So
probably, but it's also quite interesting. Like if you compare the gods of the Asia to the gods of the gods of Olympus, for instance, I mean, there's such different
no, but there are general similarities. Like I think it's like Indra.
If you think of the gods of the Asia, for example, right? They're portrayed as very heroic. They're portrayed as friends to humanity. They're portrayed as like, it's sort of like comic books are today. Whereas if you think of the gods of Olympus, they're just cunts.
The gods of Olympus, they're cunts.
They really are.
Yeah, but they are more interesting. They are kind of, that's the funny thing. Like,
well, they're interested in their humanity in all the stories. They're very interesting. But like, I mean, if gods actually had to exist, and I had to pick between the Olympians and the Aesir, I mean, I know I'd pick the Aesir.
Yeah.
I'd rather have a god that's gonna be my champion and actually fight and drink and laugh with me, rather than a god that's going to turn into a beam of light or a goat or a swan and rape me.
But you know what? If you die a martyr in the Asa trough, then you go to Valhalla, and there you eat pig. There's a pig there in Valhalla, and there you also eat an apple. So that's what you eat.
Yeah, but you only go to Valhalla. But you only go to Valhalla if you die a warrior's death. I mean, what if I die of a straw death?
And then you have to go out and fight and be killed every day.
No. That is in Valhalla.
Yeah, in Valhalla, yeah. But what are you talking about?
But you only go to Valhalla if you die in battle. What if you die of a straw death? Then you got like 3 different after. I mean, it's like in the Aesir religion, right? You got 4 different options for an afterlife, haven't you?
4, I don't remember really.
I think it's 4. It's like it's Valhalla. And then, like, the unhonored dead go to Hela's realm, but then there's like it depends on what type of person you were. I think there's like, is it 2 or 3 different status of dead?
Dude, I don't remember. I should know these things, but I don't remember actually. I can come back sometime with more information.
Forged in Valhalla by the hammer of Thor.
But in general, I prefer the pagan gods. They were more funny. They were more like, they were beyond good and evil. They were more like bodies in the sky. Like when, like Achilles, when he worshipped the war of God, in a way, he was kind of affirming life in that way, and he was in a sense worshipping himself. So,
well, the thing is, though, don't you think of these gods? I mean, they're basically indistinguishable from what today we would call superheroes. They really are. I mean, if you actually look at the ancient gods, like they got their magical abilities by being part god, by being the descendant of a god, or their mum or their dad was a god or a nymph or whatever, and they could do this or that. They had incredible strength, or they had like massive regenerative abilities, super healing. They had flight, they had this, they had that. They really were. I mean, if you put them in a comic book today, that just go side by side with other superheroes. I mean, in fact, if you think of like Thor,
that's why I think they are so good.
I mean, like Chris. I'm just saying, Chris Hemsworth, who portrays Thor in the Avengers films, right? If you actually look at the actual mythology, his Thor, the Thor, the superhero that he portrays, is basically exactly the same character as the one that the ancient peoples worshipped. I mean, the Loki in the films is very different to the original Loki of mythology. But I mean, it's practically the same. Pretty much really different. He's blonde, and in the myths, he's a redhead.
Loki is kind of a bad dude. He's more, but this, as I said, the whole point is back then this stupid good and evil duality didn't exist. I think the pagan gods was much better because they were kind of, you like looked up to them like idols, and then you tried to like be like them, and they were kind of role models. But they were role models in a kind of life-affirming way. So it wasn't this like stupid Saddam Hussein in the sky that punish you if you do that and that. No, it was like life-affirming, good stuff.
Well,
a lot of action.
Interest. But I don't know. But basically, just the ancient version of superheroes.
Yeah, I agree. But it was superheroes that you looked up to and tried to model yourself after. So they filled a purpose in that way.
Unless they were supervillains.
Yeah, but these villains didn't exist in that way. You had the kind of the giants that you didn't
Loki
like.
was a supervillain.
Yeah, it was a supervillain, but this duality between good and evil hadn't festered yet. So they were beyond good and evil, and that was the good thing.
I don't know why you're saying that, because that's just not true at all.
What do you mean not true?
I mean, it's not true.
No, it is true, because they didn't have this not the kind of sense as it is in Christianity and so on. They were more just life affirming, and they didn't. It was not like
actual people, the people at the time who actually lived. I mean, they definitely had a sense of good and evil. You just got to look at ancient writings.
Yeah, but not the same kind of good and evil as in Christianity.
Sure they did. I mean, the whole question of the problem of evil, if God is omnipotent but does this or that, that came from an ancient Greek polytheist.
No, you look. The ancient Greeks, the first dude that came up with this, as we know of at least, was Zoroaster. And you have to remember that Zoroastrianism kind of later infected the Hellenistic world, and it's probably
I'm fairly certain that was by the author of the ancient Greek who wrote that novel on the nature of things. He was the one who first mentioned that good and evil thing. You know what? I'm going to look this up.
Okay, good. Yeah, what are these things? Not as old as Buddhism, Hinduism, or the Norse gods. No, not as old as Buddhism.
Yeah, this is about the claim that Islam is a modern religion. It's not.
Oh, okay. But what, not as old as Buddhism?
Because I said that Islam has its roots in the beliefs of the 2,000 years ago, of the people 2,000 years ago. That is the history of Islam.
I mean, Islam is a mishmash of a lot of things. I mean, as Dhul Qarnayn, the reason why Alexander the Great had two horns, when it was depicted the two horns, was because it's some kind of ancient Egyptian god had that. I don't remember the name of the Egyptian god, but there are a lot of things in the Quran, in Islam.
It is talked in the chat about it. It's Apis, a bull god. But
yeah, I'll just go right now. Apericus.
Can't we let pre-Islam today out of the way, because my preparation is still ongoing for next time.
Okay.
And I'm doing a good.
Are you doing the
prophets? Is there any prophets that you have, or has anyone ever come across any kind of prophet who is actually a prophet? In other words, can prophesy something, did something special, and is not just a myth and a legend?
Yeah.
No.
Naeem, this presentation thing, Is this going to be on Jinn&Tonic show?
Yes, of course.
Ah, okay.
So that you or Rob will not have too much to do next time.
Oh, nice. Good. Okay.
But Stop Spamming will have to do much because I've reached now like the 9th page or something like that, and the 8th or the 9th page, and it will get like 12 pages or so in general.
What's the presentation called? What's it? Should we call it pre-Islam or
just pre-Islam? I think it's a general good title,
okay,
pre-Islam.
Okay. Pre-Islam. Okay, that's good.
Because I will show many things and bring also some slides, etc. to
It's Islam
entertain.
and its place in history.
No, that's wrong. That's you can't have a real place in history because it's not a fixed time period. It's just mixing together like anything in human history because
Exactly, that's what history is.
Yeah, but history to call it a place in history is wrong because it indicates like it is a specific time period which is not.
Okay, that's not what I'm trying to imply because Islam is all over the show. I mean, it developed over a time period of something like 2,000 years before it actually came to be 1,000 years ago.
Okay, we take this next week.
Okay, but this is
Answer.
a question. Raven said, yes, there have been prophets, somebody who actually was able to prophesy and did something special. Who's that?
Himself.
Nothing for someone.
What? There were two people.
Well, I have done many miraculous things. I have prophesied things. You know what? In fact, just recently, 2 prophecies happened to me. Last week, I had a dream about a friend of mine I had spoken to in ages. And then the very next day, she gets on Skype after months of not hearing about her. And then last night, I had a dream about her again. And then today, the delivery man knocks on the door. She sent me an early birthday present.
You know what that is called? It's coincidence, not prophecy.
I'm a prophet because last time I told everybody in the chat that Marshall will not get this whole burden of proof thing. This was a whole waste of time. And what did he do today? He again tried to swap it around the burden of proof. So
actually, is Marshall coming back on? Because I want to know if he thinks anything of what I said.
He rejects everything.
Okay, Ansar.
Yes.
Is it Ansar or is it Ansar?
You can use either. I don't mind.
Ansar.
Ansar, did you enjoy my presentation?
When did you do your presentation? Sorry, I've been on the chatting to people as well. Sorry, did you just do it now?
No, he did it in the beginning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I missed it in the beginning. I came late, so. Yeah.
Wait,
I was wondering.
I
No,
jacked
don't worry. I was just struggling to put something together.
Answer. He's been talking for 1.5 hours.
Really?
Oh, has he? Oh,
I jacked you up. Ansar. Okay, but what do you think of Moses? Did Moses exist? No, oops, I silenced him completely. Sorry. What happened?
Sure, ask Anza. Why not? Anza, did Moses exist?
yes. Moses. I think there probably was maybe a character by some kind of name like Moses who may have been in some kind of position that could.
I just explained why. No, I just explained why not only that's not true, but that it was copied from a mythological figure called Oscar Vithius.
Yeah,
and
that
how
might be
that itself was, and how that itself was taken from a text by a Jewish rabbi. That text didn't even it probably didn't even exist. It was attributed to be like 300 years earlier than when it was actually written, and it was written during like the height anti-Jewish propaganda by Egypt.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I didn't say that he definitely did exist. I said that it may have been possible that some vague character that vaguely matched that type of.
Well, yeah, I mean that's one of the things if you think about mythological characters. I mean, if you think of any random mythological character, there could have been a basis in truth. I mean, like Hercules, for example. You know, I mean, could it have been possible that back about 3,000 years ago in ancient Greece, there was some man who was unusually strong, who got a reputation for his strength? Is it also true that in some night of schizophrenic madness, he slaughtered his wife and children? Could be, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he fought the Hydra,
but
or that that he was the son of Zeus. I mean, Krishna's another one.
But
is
the
it
thing with
possible
Moses,
is it possible that sometime in ancient India there was a child born to cattle farmers who grew up to be a wise man and developed following? Sure, happened all the time. Doesn't mean he was a god. I mean, like, what's another one? What's that Viking hero? Fuck, Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar Lothbrok probably did exist, but it doesn't mean he was a descendant of Odin.
What? Of course he was. Look, but the thing with Moses is
with a figure like Moses, there's actually no evidence there even was a historical figure, and then the myth later grew over time. There's literally nothing.
But the thing with Moses is that, like with the Hercules or something like that, then yes, maybe there was some strong dude that Bard sang about, and then the story about him developed. But the thing with Moses is that the whole story seems historically very unplausible.
And also plagiarism of Sargon of Akkad.
So what? You're talking about the real Sargon of Akkad?
Well, who do you think I'm talking about?
You're not talking about the famous YouTuber.
Sargon of Akkad, the ancient king.
Okay, good.
A story that predates Moses by a millennia bears an uncanny resemblance to the Moses story.
Okay, but you don't have Moses, you don't have any prophet where there is any kind of evidence for the physical existence of any of them.
Joseph Smith.
No. Wait a minute.
He wasn't the prophet.
Hang on. There's plenty of evidence Joseph Smith actually existed.
Yes, Joseph Smith. Yes, but I'm talking about the
prophesied?
prophets.
What did he prophesy, Raven? That's a prophet. A prophet tells you.
I think Eden was in Missouri. The Native Americans were a cursed, lost tribe of Jews. That God lives on a planet in Saturn.
That's in a strange way that would be history, but it's not even history. But a prophecy would be in the future, Raven.
You know what? I don't know enough about Mormonism.
No, the problem is prophecy. In other words, there is no prophet that has ever made a prophecy. There is no prophet that has done anything special. There is no person in time that has done anything out of the ordinary. This is the summary of the whole thing.
I think I remember reading on the news a couple of years ago. There was a bloke that predicted 9/11.
Yeah, but
because I said the brothers will fall. That is not a prophecy.
I have the answer.
Oh, hang about. Back in the 90s, I did see this. There was a bloke that wrote in his high school yearbook, I believe that the Cubs will win the World Series in 2017.
But
he actually prophesied
didn't say the date, and he didn't say by how much, and he didn't say how much was bet on the. You don't get.
But he said that this team will win in this year.
Kind of prophecy anyone can do. You can write down, if you write down enough claims about the future, it's pretty likely that some of them will turn out to be correct. But this
American lad, when he was leaving high school, actually wrote down the name of the team and the year they'd win.
Yeah, that's why is that implausible? That's highly plausible.
I know. Why couldn't you prophesize something else? Like prophesize the lottery number and posted it to me.
Yeah, that's highly implausible. But this is the answer.
Brown.
Joseph Smith, he was called a prophet. Dum 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 dum. He started the Mormon religion. Dum 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 dum.
If somebody's smoking something.
Can anybody bring anything different on any prophets? I think. Oh, Raven, are you going to continue on this prophet series?
I don't know. Am I? I was actually looking in the chat and I couldn't even see anything. It just it started with this comment by Pull-Ups saying correct, and then I don't even know if people liked it.
I was going to
This
say
is not the
something.
point. You're fishing for compliments. This is not.
And
the
I'm
point.
fishing for
Raven,
compliments. I'm fishing for compliments to know if people liked it. If they liked
it's
it, I
not
might do
whether
it
they
again.
liked
If no
it.
one liked
We
it, I
told
won't.
you it's brilliant. We told you it's very well researched and founded.
No one
You
told
can
me that.
still polish up on your presentation skills. Okay, that is it. So you can do these things the next time. The question is, are you still interested in doing a next time after Ike is finished?
Sure, I guess. People want me to.
What's happening next week then?
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing though, but I'm actually like looking to see what people think, to see if like, you know, if people like it, sure, but if they don't, then I mean that seems like a kind of logical thing to do.
It's fine, Raven, but maybe sometime in the future. But now, next week, Ike and those dudes will have the presentation about pre-Islamic things.
No, I'm just a translator.
Okay.
So if it's bad English I mean, beside my accent, it's the fault of Stop Spamming, so that everybody knows.
Yeah. No, I have the answer. Blame Canada.
Sorry, I stepped away. What's Ike doing next week?
Apparently blaming Canada.
Islam in history.
Okay, cool.
No, just pre-Islam. Just pre-Islam.
What is pre-Islam? You can't have pre-Islam. Islam before Islam was nothing. I mean, what is pre-Ike? Nothing.
Pre-Ike would be my parents, so it's very easy.
Okay. How long has we been? Now I'm talking for 2 hours. So, does anyone has something more to say about this?
I was going to say something when I was asked a question earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically what I was saying, and the conversation got derailed. What I was saying is that I was asked about whether Moses really existed, and I started off saying that it may be possible that somebody along those lines may have existed. I'm not saying he did. I don't really care whether he did. What I'm concerned with, and what I think is more important, is whether any of the magical stuff that surrounds the story and surrounds that character actually happened. Now, that is what might concern me. So,
yeah, what you've just reminded me of something I would like to ask if anyone's aware of this, because we just had Kevin earlier going on about the Holy Spirit. I mean, it's true that in the hadiths, wait, is it? No, it's hadiths, not Quran. It says that Jesus performed an act of creation pretty much akin to Allah. It says in the hadiths that Jesus got some clay, sculptured it into a form of a bird, breathed life onto the clay birds he'd sculptured. They came to life and flew away. Pretty much the bird version of Allah creating Adam. In fact, I think I remember something about there was like a group of Sufis who actually did believe Jesus was the Son of God. In fact, the Quran itself even mentions something like that. It kind of like goes up and down, and I mean, it's not as clear as you think it is. Most of the whole thing about him not being the Son of God actually comes from hadiths and tasfiyas.
What did he say? What comes from tafsir?
The idea that, like, the majority Muslim opinion that Jesus is not the Son of God. I mean, the Quran itself doesn't allude to this. In fact, even if you look at the Quranic description of Jesus on the cross, it's kind of, we're not even sure whether he did die or not, because it says different things and it's interpreted different ways. And then, like, it's mostly the hadiths and tasfiyas that say Jesus wasn't the Son of God. And yet Jesus is fucking getting a bit of clay, sculpting it into a bird, and then breathing life into it, and then the bird's flying away. Just like Allah did with Adam.
Okay, and now Raven is gone. I mean, sorry, Rob is gone.
Rob is
I wanted
gone.
to ask him if Titans TV is on every Friday this time. Because I watched the video with him on Titans TV when they spoke about racism on the Kemets, and it got me pissed off to no end. So I thought, okay, if this is a weekly thing, I want to go and talk to them. But now Rob is gone. I don't know if they.
Sorry, racism on the what? What did you say? It was racism on the what?
Kemet.
Kemet. On the Kemet.
Black supremacy.
Oh.
I think it's every Thursday or so, because Lamb of God talked in the chat. He watched yesterday.
Lamb of God.
What would racial supremacy actually mean? Like, what characteristics would be superior?
But isn't it more like that you deliberately want work for one race being a superior? Does it really have to be like does it really have to be that you think that a race is superior?
What characterizes superior?
What is superior? What is the criteria for superior?
No, but like if they say like white supremacy or black supremacy, isn't that they want their own race to be supreme?
This is the whole point. What they're propagating is that because apparently the whole human race originated somewhere in Africa, this somehow makes the first recipient of human DNA a black person in Africa. And that's why Sarah was saying, well, I'm your daddy, son, because I'm the daddy, because you got my DNA, which is 6 million years ago. I don't understand it. I mean, for me, it's utterly stupid. And
well,
they're talking about stopping racism and then being racist on top of everything else, which I think is absolutely like utter bullshit.
Well, the weird thing there is, the weird thing there is, if you actually think of modern humans today, we're not just ancient Africans. We also have Neanderthal DNA in us. In fact, I'm fairly certain. There's only one type of human on the planet that doesn't have Neanderthal DNA, and I think it's like a mountain people in somewhere in North Africa.
No.
But the other thing is,
the whole sub-Saharan Africa are.
But the thing is, like this idea of like, well, I'm black and all humans descend from blacks. It's like, and you got my DNA. Okay, if you were like 100,000 years old, and we actually descended from you, you'd have a point. But you're a descendant just like the rest of us, so we're actually brothers or at least cousins. You know, it's not a parent-child thing. It's a sibling or cousin thing.
The more we talk about racism, the more racist it gets, and this is why I think we should just stop talking about, you know, physical characteristics or parameters or anything just because we have more or less melanin in the skin. So we should stop talking about all this shit.
I'd actually be quite interested.
The melanin stuff is not even interesting because the Neanderthals probably had very little melanin in their skin, and there might even been different skin colors of Neanderthals.
Anyway,
I'd actually be quite interested in hearing Rob and Stops talk about racism, since they both came from South Africa during apartheid.
Exactly, this is the point. And this is why I know racism. I know racism firsthand. And I know the racism in the US, like the modern racism. I know the modern racism in Europe. I know all these different forms of racism that you get in Asia, where a long nose always has preference over a short nose because it's a racist society. There is latent racism everywhere. This is why the more we talk about it, the more prevalent it gets. This is why I just fucking keep
Wait, stop spamming. So if you go to Asia, you will be worshipped.
Correct.
Because you have a long nose.
Correct.
That's cool.
You know, funnily enough.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Funnily enough.
تفضل.
Will I get any chick in Asia, you mean? Because I have a very, very long and big nose.
Can we stop the show now? I think it's enough.
Okay, I have an hadith for the day.
Excellent.
Oh, just before you do, I just wanted to point something out which I think is funny, because you're worrying about white supremacists earlier. Like, a lot of white supremacists nowadays absolutely worship statistics. It's really, really funny to watch. Anyway, most white supremacists actually admit that like Orientals are smarter than them, because that's what the stats show, and they are stat worshippers. And I just find that quite funny. Like, they admit, they go on about white supremacism, but like, oh yeah, Southeast Asians, they're smarter than us.
But this is what I mean.
But I think they counter it by saying that Europeans are more imaginative and inventive.
But when
That's
you say,
you actually
this is what I mean when you say supremacist, what do you mean by supremacist? You mean
racial supremacy? People that look like us are superior to everyone else.
yeah, but
We have white
can you
skin,
give
we
an
are
example
superior,
of a
but
dude that
Orientals are
is?
smarter.
Can you
But
give
no,
an
they say,
example?
like I said, that whites are more inventive and creative. But if you actually look at Asia, and you actually look at all the stories and the inventions, and fucking hell, the manga, the animes, I'm not really sure I buy the whole they're less imaginative thing.
No, first we know that there is a like there are cognitive studies that shows that if you have high IQ, you will also be more creative and so on. But and imagination, I mean, you can say that like if you're schizophrenic, maybe you have a more wild imagination. But like when you say white supremacist, you say that can you give me an example of such a dude? Because this is like, what does it really mean?
This is the whole point. Don't listen to the show. Go to Titans TV. Go and watch the entire segment. It's 2 hours long, and go and enjoy and have fun.
No, but I'm asking Raven. When you say that white supremacists love stats, okay, but who is this white supremacist?
I don't know. I didn't invite him around for tea.
You don't know. Why did you say it?
I didn't mention a single actual person. I just said that I've actually looked up at what white supremacists are doing nowadays. And the funny thing is,
if you have looked up what white supremacists do these days, can you give me an example of these dudes that you have looked up?
Well, no. I mean, I do know a couple of white supremacists in real life, but they're mostly very low intelligent idiots who never really. They actually don't do anything to back up their claims.
Okay, but you don't back up any claims either, because you say that you have looked up white supremacists, but you don't even know who they are.
Because it's on the internet. They're just like pseudo names on a website. They're not.
Okay, but give me an example of such a pseudo name.
Stormbringer.
Okay, I don't know who it is. But what I mean is,
another, I think it was
are they really
really
white supremacists? Because, like,
you know, you can just very easily find white supremacist sites on the internet. You can find lots of supremacist sites.
Yeah, but I don't know. This is what I mean. This, like, political dudes, they love to throw out these vague, like, words that doesn't mean anything. What is a white supremacist?
We go to the hadith of the day.
Okay, we go to the hadith of the day now. Anyway, narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet ﷺ said, Adam and Moses argued with each other. Moses said to Adam, "O Adam, you are our father who disappointed us and turned us out of paradise." Then Adam said to him, "O Moses, Allah favored you with his talk to you directly, and he wrote the Torah for you with his own hand. Do you blame me for action which Allah had written in my fate 40 years before my creation?" So Adam confuted Moses. The Prophet ﷺ added, repeating the statement 3 times. Sahih
Do you have
Bukhari.
ADHD or something? Or like
Yippee-yay!
it's an obsessive compulsive disorder.
Obsessive compulsive disorder. The Prophet
I mean,
Mohammed.
like you see a lot of it, and it's like, you know, the wing on one fly, the wing on another. It's like, oh, I'll repeat it 3 times, and like,
Yeah.
Did you have like OCD?
I think religious people in general, like Robert Sapolsky, he talked about this. Like, he thinks that many of these things, where you do things with this certain number of times, and the like wudu, for
Like always after the toilet with one foot, not the other. It's like
yeah, exactly.
Really
that it probably originally came from people with OCD.
Dr. Sheldon Cooper knocks 3 times.
Islam is full of OCD, yeah. Islam is full of OCD. But I mean religion in general.
See you later.
Okay. What's the name of the Titans TV video?
I have no idea. I don't even know if it's on now. I just saw when I was watching it earlier, while I was waiting, I came across this and I started watching this and I wrote some comments on this and I saw it was Titans TV and that they have a regular thing going at 11 p.m. GMT.
Yes.
Which is 20 minutes ago. See you next Friday. Bye.
Bye. Okay, next week there will
Thank you,
be
David,
presentation by
for
Ike
your work.
and everybody. Cheers.
Years long.
Bye.